Welcome to Impact's International Women's Day 2024 Vodcast in collaboration with UpliftHER, the global podcast series that they're running where we're going to be hearing from women around the world, sharing their successes, insights and challenges. I'm delighted to be joined by the fabulous Dipti Shah, who I'm fortunate to have known for many years. Dipti's accomplishments are an inspiration. Both her personal journey and her HR career as an HR leader within the creative industries. Building her career at B2B, Fruct, Octagon and Mediacom. And then before moving into the HR consultancy space and more recently launching her very own business, the Conscious Rebel Leadership this year. Welcome, Dipti.
Thanks, Jules. It's great to kind of be here and I think share this time and space with you to kind of, I think, really talk about some things that are really important about, I think, inspiring inclusion, as is kind of, I guess, this year's theme for International Women's Day.
Absolutely.
I'm really looking forward to talking to you, I think, or us having a conversation around allyship.
Yeah.
I think sharing some stories and hopefully some insights into navigating your career and career progression as a woman of colour. And also I think it's really important that we talk about emerging leaders and established leaders and how, you know, they can really kind of, I think, develop and grow to really become more inclusive in the spaces that they have that ability to do it.
Great, I love that. We have some great topic of conversation to have, so let's get stuck in. If we kick off with allyship then, what could we be doing? What can we be doing more?
So I think it's really important to understand first and foremost what allyship is, and I think, you know, there'll be many people, I'm sure, that have a sense and a feel of what that is. And for me, when I think about allyship, it's really thinking about kind of your position of power, of influence and privilege. And it's remembering they're not all fixed positions. They change and they shift, I think, as you kind of navigate your career, as you kind of evolve. You can take different places and spaces within that. Yeah. I think the other thing that's really important to remember is privilege is it can be inherited. So, you know, for example, if you are a white male, there are certain privileges that come with that, and that is just innately inherited, but it can also be acquired. So for someone like me, for example, you know, as I've kind of evolved up my own sort of leadership journey, I have been in positions of influence and power, so to speak, which enables me to do things for others kind of as well. And I think what I kind of really want to talk about is that there are many roles that you can play as a kind of ally, and I think it's really thinking about what those kind of different roles are and where you can use your power, influence and privilege to kind of very much do that. And I think the other thing is really looking at it from a perspective of it's not about necessarily job title or kind of where you sit in the organisation. It's really about kind of your own self journey of where you sit within that. So I think for me, there are a few roles that you can kind of do that I think have an immense impact on anyone's career, but particularly I think women's careers. And you know, we've spoken about this before, which is kind of the idea of someone taking up the sponsor kind of role or the champion role within an organisation. And that's someone that's very much kind of, I think, recognises what someone is kind of contributing and really sort of championing that. And so, like, you know, for example, for me, I think in one of, I think the most pivotal part of my career, where I wasn't seeking it, by the way, but actually found in my boss someone who could see what I was actually capable of doing. And it was someone that intentionally started to kind of talk about what I was doing and amplifying that in rooms that I wasn't in rooms that I was in different places of the organisation. Fantastic. And what that kind of gave me, right, was the start of building my own platform in many ways. I think getting recognised and valued for kind of what I was sort of doing, and it started to connect me with people in a very different way across an organisation where I otherwise wouldn't perhaps have necessarily had the opportunity, or it would taken maybe far longer to have got there.
Right, super empowering and rare, really. Actually,
yes.
Too rare, unfortunately. But you're right. It's to have the added endorsement from somebody that's really recognising certain traits and helping to elevate. It can be so powerful in a business to give that person a voice when they perhaps didn't have it before.
Absolutely, and I think, you know, to put it into context for me. It was a point in my career where actually everything turbocharged,
right,
in terms of responsibility, in terms of the role that I played
right,
at the leadership table, right? Like, so for example, in less than 4 years, I think if we want to talk about it in the context of career progression and promotion, I mean, I went from a head of HR to an SVP of people and culture for Europe, and so and I want to be very honest, like that was also my work and kind of doing that, but actually it paved a way to enable me to kind of really, really do that. And
were they aware that they were doing that? Do you think it was a conscious piece?
I think there was a level of a conscious piece kind of in it, but I think it was very much born from kind of, it was looking at, I think, what I was capable of, but it was also looking at the value that it added for where the organisation was going and what it was trying to kind of achieve. So it was twofold. I think the other side of that, what was interesting was that the dynamic and the relationship was that actually we were both learning from each other. So it wasn't just a one-way kind of, this is what was happening. It was someone that was also... I think really looking at kind of how they led and sort of how that translated and what kind of I was, you know, they were learning from that as well.
That's a true success story, really, as well, isn't it?
But you're right, it is rare.
Yeah. Was it a male or a female?
It was a male. It was a white male, actually.
Right, okay.
So you know, and it's actually someone that's still a very dear friend and a relationship that's kind of gone beyond that. But you know, I'll give you another example. It was someone who, so I was part of a global organisation, and it was someone who was talking about, not just me but others, of the work that was coming out of kind of Europe, and the parent company sat in the US. And what it did is, the next time I was over in the US, is I got to go and spend time with the global CEO.
Fantastic.
It was meant to be a 15-minute chat of a kind of, you're here, it's great, hi. It turned into an hour of kind of conversing over lots of different things, and it was, for me, those nuggets and opportunities to kind of, it wasn't about necessarily going, this is me and this is what I can do, but just the ability to, I think, connect. And then kind of make the most of that opportunity with something. And I think it's something that anyone can do for anyone. It's something that, you know, I think as I've been also put in that position, it's kind of whoever that is, and I think it's whoever that is in the context of a non-majority group that I'm not part of, or whoever isn't part of, it's important to kind of do that. And I think I very consciously and intentionally make sure that I sort of do that for others and kind of pave the way as well.
You know what's interesting when you think about allies as well? I did a roundtable recently about empowering women in leadership, and what came out of that was, I suppose it's disappointing really when you think about this, but women almost being the worst allies of other women, and that we just don't do enough. And I think that there can be a mindset of, but my journey was so tough and so hard and I had to overcome so much that why should somebody have an easier ride? Which is one thought, you know, that's one kind of thought process, but obviously we need to be thinking much bigger than that, and we need to be thinking about, you know, it shouldn't have been that hard, and actually paving the way for other women coming up the ranks in the future is just going to strengthen the everything, really.
Absolutely, right.
And that women should be each other's biggest allies.
Absolutely, and I think, you know, for me, I've seen both sides of that coin and sort of experienced it, right? So It's a really strange one, because I never thought that women wouldn't amplify or kind of champion each other. And my experience of and it's actually quite extreme experiences of where women don't do that, but are sat on particularly leadership teams. It's almost this sort of grappling of, I think you're right, it's been hard for me to get here, but I'm also in a unique position. I think the other side of it is that when you're the only woman on a leadership team, and often your value is contextualized in that group as because you are the only woman, there's something that you kind of almost hold on to around that, that then sort of makes you go, I need to sort of protect that part of it in some way. But it does such a disservice to kind of anyone else that's trying to come in and do that. And I've been on leadership teams where I've had, it's actually another female leader block me, undermine me, throw me under a bus, and kind of, it's like, well, we're nowhere closer to actually moving forward, right? On the other hand, I was on a all white male leadership team for a significant period of time, and actually another diverse female joined the leadership team, and even in and amongst that I had to think about and sort of shift myself and kind of go, how do I make space, and how does this kind of work? And I will tell you, Jules, it was the person that we ended up being each other's biggest allies. And it wasn't just about kind of being each other's biggest allies in terms of championing each other in a room or not in a room. For me, it was also a place where we were also able to navigate behaviour and certain things that were happening that kind of needed to sort of be broken, so to speak. And it wasn't trying to do it in a sort of challenging, aggressive manner, but it was like, hang on, it was validating each other's experiences and kind of going, how can we sort of work together to kind of do that, right? And I think about the times where I've cried with this person, I think about the times of like frustration, I think about the times of like some of the great things we achieved together, and it had a profound impact. It can be really lonely as a woman, I think, on leadership teams, particularly as a woman of colour. I think you carry other things, and if the organisation isn't quite there or can't meet you, it can be really difficult. And so the power of that for me was kind of phenomenal, and I know that was worked both ways, and again, rare. But I think businesses really shouldn't underestimate, and women particularly, the power that kind of sort of is and exists kind of within that.
Absolutely. So are there other roles that allies could be playing?
Absolutely, right. I think, for want of a better phrase, the role of an advocate. So that is someone that kind of really makes sure that an idea or a problem that needs solving, and whoever's kind of come up with that, that actually it's acknowledged, and it's very clear that person is acknowledged for that and called out for it. It's quite sad that in this day and age we still see that behaviour of other people kind of taking credit for somebody else's kind of work, and I think you still see it, particularly for women, and I've experienced it, and I've got to a place where I'm very confident in calling it out for myself, but that's a
lot of people wouldn't, right?
Right? And that's a journey in itself. I think the other role that we haven't really yet touched on, and I think there's so much to unpack on this one, is what I call the upstander. So it's someone that, and by the way, allyship is not around doing something for or to someone, right? It's in collaboration, and it's very much kind of thinking about it in that way. And so the upstander is someone who, if they witness language, inappropriate language or inappropriate behaviour, or witness like something that has made someone deeply uncomfortable, is from a group, a non-majority group that they're not part of doing something about it.
Yeah.
Now it's a complex area, and I think it's something that you have to tread carefully and with sensitivity. And I'm not suggesting for a minute that you go out and address it straight there and then. That may be the right thing to do, but it might also, on that occasion, but also it may be that you want to connect with that person afterwards, check in with them, talk to them about like what you've observed, and also let them be part of how that wants to be kind of sort of dealt with, right? I think sometimes being an ally, you can go in with great intent, and it is. But remember, this isn't about you. This is about kind of the other person, the other group, kind of that's experiencing it. And I think the other thing I would kind of the other role I think is this. I call it like the amplification as well, right? So often it's like the same people are asked to talk in company meetings. The same people are asked to represent the organisation externally, if it's at conferences or if it's on a podcast or what it is. And I think it's also using that avenue to let others have a voice, and for let others and recommend others, right? And start to kind of really use that space to bring other people into a conversation or an area where they have equally, if not more, expertise in, right? And not always being like I'm the expert in the room. I think that's really important. And I think the final thing I'll say around sort of allyship is there's no perfect way. Again, it's a journey, and it's I think it's important to at points to kind of take stock in terms of sort of where you are and what you're kind of doing and how you're sort of showing up. And
the awareness, isn't it? It's being aware and present about it.
Absolutely. And I think not being afraid, and mistakes or learnings are going to be made, they're going to happen in all of that, and I think it's all of us giving each other some grace around that is super important. And I'd rather have someone try than not and be afraid.
Great. What would you say if you're thinking about your own successes and what you've overcome? What is there? Would you class a superpower for yourself that that you think could be inspiring for others to learn a little more about?
So I mean, I've talked about this before, and I think particularly as a woman of colour, there are so many superpowers that we kind of all have, I think, that we're not even often aware of. And one of the stories, and I think I've only just put this all together more recently than necessarily kind of back somewhere, is I think for me this power to connect with people from all walks of life, but also adapt to different environments. And for me it comes from really, I mean, I think when I look back sort of growing up and I think about that in itself, so, and you know this as well, right? So I'm of Indian background. I grew up in a home where it was 3 generations. So my grandparents, my parents, and then there was me, first born kind of in the UK. English isn't my first spoken language, so I learnt that kind of a little bit later on. And that was kind of growing up, and then you add in sort of I was lucky enough to have a private school education, and we had a family business that was actually we were selling toys, had a great childhood, but shops that were in very kind of affluent areas. So the mix of different environments and cultures that I was already in and experiencing, when I think about it, it's phenomenal, the shift and the change, right? But it wasn't just the environments. Like, actually growing up in an Indian household, patriarchy is a very dominant system. My granddad was the kind of head of the house. What he said kind of went. Women are seen and not kind of heard. And so, you know, that was kind of there. Then you go to this school where you're like strong, independent woman, kind of that piece. And so I think for me there was all this mishmash sort of kind of growing up. And I jumped into the kind of workplace, and I started to realise that while there are challenges that came with some of that, there are some real superpowers, and that's kind of where it's this really innate ability to be agile and to adapt. And so, you know, I think in that story and context it's really important for women and women of colour to really kind of recognise their own journeys, right? And I think
because really, people can shy away from it, can't they? And try and actually put it in a box and keep it very separate. Yes. Whereas actually you can leverage on that.
Exactly, right? So I think it is recognising kind of those things and utilising that in a really positive way.
Yeah, brilliant. Nice. What about from kind of key learnings that we think could be quite powerful for women to hear?
So I think there are probably a few things around this, right? I think for me, I call it this idea of being proactive. And what I mean by that is, you know, we often jump into organisations, and it doesn't matter what role you're kind of going to, what career trajectory you're kind of doing. But I would say look beyond the job that you're kind of there to sort of do. Be curious about the different teams, how you fit in kind of and connect sort of what the system that you're kind of very much in. You know, I was someone that was always really curious about how things kind of worked, you know, throughout my journey. And if I saw somebody that could do something really well, like I wanted to understand more and also kind of be able to do that. So look beyond that. I think the other thing is, and I guess with that comes the fact is you learn from everywhere, right? We often hear this thing that on the job training and all of that, but actually the informal stuff and the people around you, right,
can make a massive difference.
Can make a massive difference. I think network is really, really important inside the organisation, but also outside. And I think it's really important to find people that you resonate on. I talk about on a values basis. Because when you look at it from that, then it still opens up people from all walks of life, right? But also people that are very, very different to you. It's really, really important. You know, like I've known you for kind of years, and you know, like, and journeyed, and I consider you you're more than part of my network, but I consider you as someone that has been influential in terms of part of that kind of sort of established sort of network. And so I think that's kind of really, really important. And I also think for women, like, there is always choice. And when you're thinking about the organisation that you want to, or even the career path you want to kind of step into, really kind of think about where you are on your journey. So for example, are you at a point where you really want to turbocharge your career and you're ready to kind of go and push? Are you in a place or space that requires more flexibility professionally and personally? And kind of what are you really sort of looking for? And also as a woman, and particularly women of colour, like, where is that organisation on its journey through inclusivity and DE&I? And you know, everyone's on a journey and are at very different places. And I think it's really important to, as part of your interview process, to really unearth where an organisation is. And I think it's really important for organisations to tell the truth. because the two need to come together at a place where a person feels kind of held, and a organisation is able to kind of sort of hold them, right?
Yeah.
So I would say to organisations, do not shy away from being honest, because I see a lot that are trying to sell something that's not true. For people to really kind of ask those questions. You are going into somewhere where you're looking to stay for a period of time. You spend most of your time there. So it needs to be kind of right.
And it's okay that a company is on a journey. It's about being transparent, isn't it? And owning it and knowing that there's work to do, because everyone and every company has work to do in this space. But yeah, I think it's the transparency thing. So somebody's aware of what value they can bring coming in to help aid that, as well as know what they're walking into.
Absolutely, right. And it's also gives you, I think, an idea of as someone that's stepping in that's from a non-majority group. Like, what is the expectation and onus of some of the work that you may also do or not do, or kind of be called upon, right? And I think that's really important. It still has to be a choice versus something that's kind of pushed on someone as well, and you aren't going to know that if you aren't asking some of those slightly harder questions as well. Absolutely. Wonderful. Well, Dipti, thank you. This has been incredible to have this conversation and this discussion. We need to do a second vodcast, so let's bring it on. But for now, that's Jules and Dipti celebrating International Women's Day 2024. Thank you. Thank you.